Psalm 37, verses 1 to 9. Don't worry about the wicked or envy those who do wrong, for like grass, they soon fade away. Like spring flowers, they soon wither. Trust in the Lord and do good. Then you will live safely in the land and prosper. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you your heart's desires. Commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust him, and he will help you. He will make your innocence radiate like the dawn, and the justice of your cause will shine like the noonday sun. Be still in the presence of the Lord, and wait patiently for him to act. Don't worry about evil people who prosper or fret about their wicked schemes. Stop being angry. Turn from your rage. Don't lose your temper. It only leads to harm. For the wicked will be destroyed, but those who trust in the Lord will possess the land.
Seated, please. Good morning. I hope you have had a good week this past week, and that we are here today to just bring our best before our God to give him glory and honor and praise. Have you ever felt like there's never enough hours in the day to get everything done? Have you ever felt like you're bound by the responsibilities of life? Do you ever replay a conversation in your head and you think, oh, I should have said this, or I should have done that? Do you go to bed at night and when you lay your head on the pillow, your mind is still going in 10 different directions? For many of us, that is our reality. Situations don't unfold as we expect. Relationships are complicated. Plans fall apart. Something goes wrong, and we immediately begin to try to fix it. We try to fix life. Our anxiety rises because we don't know what's going to happen. And usually we're not just carrying one concern. Usually it's a compilation of concerns and problems and issues and uncertainties. And when life becomes uncertain, our tendency is to tighten our grip. And so the stress builds. And we feel compelled to do something, just anything, to regain control. So we think harder, we plan more, we replay the situation, we search for some way to make everything turn out right. But instead of our burden feeling lighter, in all that we do, it seems that it feels and grows heavier. The peace that we're looking for seems to elude us. So the question then becomes, what do we do when things weighing on us that are real, but the outcome is beyond our control? Psalm 37 speaks directly to that struggle. David speaks to people who watch life unfold in ways that they can't control. And he doesn't dismiss what they see. He doesn't say, well, just try harder in your life. Instead, he shows them how to live without being consumed by what is going on around them. Psalm 37 teaches us how to strive less and trust God more. So that's what we want to look at this morning. And I invite you to turn your Bibles to Psalm 37. We're not going to read all of the psalm today, but I would encourage you this week, after we've talked about some things, to go back and read through it. But as you're turning there, I want us to sort of think first about things that we carry that were never ours to carry. There are things in life that we should care about. We care about our families, we care about relationships, we care about our health. There's a number of things that we can care about, and concern often means that those things matter deeply to us. But the thing that we have to be careful of is concern can become worry. And worry focuses on what we cannot control. Just think about it. If something is within your control, you're going to act, you're going to do, you're going to take care of whatever that is before you. But worry, really, it begins where our control ends. We worry about how someone will respond to us, what could go wrong, what might happen tomorrow. And we spend real energy on things that are outside of our control. And Jesus talks about this. In Matthew chapter 6, as he's talking about the whole idea of, he tells us, don't worry. Don't be anxious. And at the end of that discourse there, he says, look, I don't want you to worry because tomorrow, why would you put that on today? Today has enough problems of its own. And yet so oftentimes that's what we're doing. Our minds are just going, thinking about tomorrow, thinking about what's going to happen, or what may happen, or what if this, or what if that. And often worry leads to striving. Now, striving is not working hard or planning wisely, but striving begins when we begin to carry the responsibility for an outcome that is outside of our control. That we move from asking, what is the next faithful step for me to do, to believing that I have to make this turn out right. We do this in all of our relationships. We do this with our marriages, with our kids, with our friendships, maybe at work. And without realizing it, we begin trying to take on God's role. We begin to carry what only God can carry. We try to carry the timing, the outcome, another person's response, even the future. And none of those things were ever placed in our hands. You see, striving begins when faithful responsibility turns into the belief that everything depends upon us. So think about what striving produces in us. If we look just there at the text, in verses 1 and 2, David writes, he says, "Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like the grass, they will soon wither, like the green plants, they will soon die." If we drop down to verse 7 and 8, there it says, "Be still before Yahweh, and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It only leads to evil." Did you hear how many times David says the word fret? 3 different times in just this short section of Scripture. He's trying to get us to see something, because we become consumed by what we see but we cannot control. And fret has with it the idea of becoming heated or internally agitated. We see something wrong around us. And that situation then begins to produce turmoil within us. We replay what happened. We imagine what happens next. We rehearse the future conversations in our mind. And we turn that problem over and over in our minds, hoping that if we think about it enough, we will somehow gain control over it. The issue is not that we see something wrong or there's some obstacle in front of us. In Psalm 37, David sees people doing wrong. He sees the wicked succeeding. Life is unfolding not as it should, if you will. But faith does not deny what is wrong. Faith refuses to look at what is wrong as though God were absent. You see, fretting allows the problem to occupy so much of our attention that God begins to disappear from our perspective. And here's the thing, what occupies our attention will shape our heart. If you were in the discipleship class this morning, that's exactly what Mark was talking about. What we dwell upon is what will form who we are. And so, what situation then have you been mentally rehearsing until it has begun to govern your peace? Just think about that for a moment. What is it that is occupying your mind? We'll give it a number. Over 50% of the time of your week this past week, what thing has been occupying your time over 50%? You see, what happens is we begin with fretting, but then we begin to live in fear. Because the underlying cause or reason for fret is that we fear what we cannot control. We are afraid of what might happen, what we might lose. Well, what if things get worse? People won't change. Well, what if God doesn't act soon enough? All of those things are the things that go through our mind as we're running through the whole list of the litany of different possibilities to this one situation. And fear creates a sense of urgency. Fear tells us you need to do something now. And what happens is that fear crowds out our faith, our trust in God. And we feel that we must regain control before everything falls apart. And the things we do out of fear are most always the things that we regret later. Maybe we speak too quickly. We try to manipulate the situation. We compromise what we know is right. Or we force a decision before wisdom has the time to guide us. What fear? And what is it pressuring you to do? What is it that's driving you this past week? Is there something that you're just so overwhelmed with, you're like, I don't know how this is going to turn out? Ask yourself, am I allowing fear to dictate what I do? Because if we allow that to continue, then what we see in the text is that we begin to compare and envy. Notice, David warns, he says, don't be envious of those who do wrong. You think about it, on the surface, we would say, why would I be envious of that? But think about it. It seems like they are succeeding. And so what we do is we begin to compare ourselves. We compare our marriages to others who we think are succeeding. We compare our children. We compare our finances. We compare our careers. On and on it goes. We begin to compare ourselves to others whom we think are succeeding. And we wonder, well, why does it appear that they prosper when I'm trying to remain faithful and still struggling? One of the things that struck me is that comparison makes another person's life the measure of God's faithfulness to us. Now, that's not reality, but that's what we think a lot of times. And that envy turns someone else's temporary success into evidence that God has forgotten us. But in Psalm 37, David reminds us, and he says, I want you to have a different perspective, an eternal perspective. Because what he's trying to remind us here, as he says it, don't worry about the wicked and their success. They're like grass. They're going to be here today and they'll be gone tomorrow. So we need that eternal perspective to see the present moment in light of where everything is ultimately going. And that's what David is trying to get us to see. Because if we let it all continue as it is, if we let worry just keep on going, then what David says is fretting can lead us to become angry and reactive. Notice there in verse 8, he says, cease from anger and forsake wrath. I think the New Living Translation said, forsake rage. Do not fret, it leads only to evil doing. And we sit there and we say, oh, that's not going to be me. I mean, I worry, and maybe I let it consume me a little, but that's never going to be me. No, that's what David recognizes, is that your fretting doesn't just stay in the mind. It will eventually come out. It starts maybe as an irritation or a resentment, then it becomes a harsh word or a retaliation, then it becomes a manipulation. Or even a compromise. Our concern may be legitimate, but what happens is our reaction then becomes unfaithful to who God is. We begin to try to settle what we no longer trust God to handle. And if we're honest with ourselves, the greatest danger may not be the situation we cannot control, but what our need for control causes us to become. Because the progression is clear within the text here. There's something we see that we cannot control, so we begin to fret over it. Fretting leads to fear. Fear leads us to compare, to compare ourselves, to envy, to resent others for what they have. And eventually that pressure spills over into our words and our actions. And what Psalm 37 is telling us here is not just, well, stop doing those actions, but it shows us what a life of trust in God looks like in its place. What is it that a life of trusting God looks like? Psalm 37 keeps trying to show us this contrast between true at the present moment versus what is ultimately true in terms of the ultimate reality. So in Psalm 37, David will say, the wicked may seem secure, but their success is temporary. The righteous may struggle, but they are held in God's hands. God may seem slow, and I think this is one that's hard for us. because we want that immediate reaction. God, I need you now. But David is saying, God may seem slow in the moment, but he has not lost control. And the present moment is real, but it is not the final moment. So the question then becomes, how do we learn to see our lives from that larger perspective? If I'm stuck in the valley at the moment and I can't see the way through, how do I have that perspective that's looking down rather than looking just at the straight on at the obstacle? Well, David gives that to us because what he says is stay close to Yahweh. Because he knows that trust grows through a relationship with Yahweh. He says there in verse 3, trust in Yahweh and do good. Dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. That's what the New American Standard says. That wording actually could literally be translated, feed on his faithfulness. Our tendency when we are anxious is to feed on the what ifs, the worst case scenarios. What do other people think about me if I do X, Y, or Z? But David says, I want you to remember who he is. I want you to remember what he's done for you. I want you to remember how he's provided for you. I want you to remember his promises and his protection and his patience that he's given to you. You see, we cannot continually feed our minds on uncertainty and expect our hearts to live in peace. If my diet is always the what if, or how is this going to happen, I'm going to be the most fretful person there is because there's no solid foundation there. I'm always looking to something else. I'm always looking to the future, never what is right in front of me. And so he says, instead of the uncertainty, feed on God's faithfulness. Think about how God has been faithful to you this past year, this past month, this past week. And then David says, delight in Yahweh. That idea of finding your satisfaction in Him. You know, last week we talked about the idea of our worship and how the things that we find joy in, the things that we delight in, are the things that we express. We express our joy, we express what we then said was worship, was really our delight in God. That we find our satisfaction in Him. And it's not only that, but notice verse 23. It says, the steps of man are established by Yahweh, and He delights in His way. What that says is Yahweh delights in your way. When He is guiding you, that brings a smile to His face. That brings Him joy. And so there is this picture then that I think David is trying to cultivate in our minds of a father and a child. That the child finds joy in the father. That there's just this desire to be with him. Think about I'm sure there's different YouTube shorts and everything like that of the little kids, and they're just waiting for their dad to get home. And they just run to him. They're so excited. Are we that way with Yahweh? That we want to be around Him? that we want to just talk to Him and tell Him everything that's going on in our lives. That's what a father-child relationship is about. But it's not that God is up there just going, oh man, I got to hold this kid's hand. That's not it. I almost envision it like he's stooping down and he's like, hey, tell me about your day. Let's walk together through this path because I can show you how to get through it. I can give you what you need so that you can overcome. It's the idea of finding joy in our Father, who He is. Now, that doesn't mean that when we have that, our problems disappear. That doesn't mean when we have that we'll now understand everything that Yahweh is doing. But what we remember is that we are not carrying life alone. We are known, we are guided, and we are held by our Father. And that relationship gives us the security to return to what is actually ours to do. And notice what it says there in the text. It says, delight in Yahweh. But it also says, do the good that belongs to you. The eternal perspective that we're talking about is not passive, but it helps us see the limits of our responsibility clearly. You see, striving says, okay, I need to figure out how to make this situation right. Trust asks, what is the faithful thing that God has given me to do? It's not that I just sit around and say, okay, God, work my problem out. No, I'm still going to work. I'm still going to do what needs to be done. Maybe that's a conversation that you need to have with someone, an apology you need to offer. Maybe it's some sort of work that you need to complete or a boundary that you need to establish. It's that next faithful step. That's what belongs to us. You see, trust doesn't remove the responsibility, it puts it back in its proper place. So do the good thing that belongs to you and entrust God with what belongs to Him. And that's when the psalmist then says, commit your way to Yahweh. That word commit has with it the idea of a rolling over. So I want you to picture in your mind, you have put all of your burdens, everything you've been dealing with this past week, put it in a wheelbarrow. Now take that wheelbarrow and then dump it out on Yahweh's shoulders. That's the idea of committing your way to Yahweh. But if you're like me a lot of times, we don't do that very well. We will talk to Yahweh all about our problems, all about our issues. And then we get up from our prayer and we say, okay, now I got to figure out how to do it. We still manage it. We still plan and do all of these things rather than saying, Yahweh, here it is. I don't know how to make this work, but you do. And so I'm going to give it to you. You see, to commit your way to Yahweh is to give Him more than the problem. It's to give Him the outcome. It's giving up the timing, the vindication. It's giving up, well, what about that other person's response? It's giving up the demand to secure the future. Because trusting God is to believe that He will work the situation for good. Even if it may not be what I want or what I expect. I think about in my own life, it was actually before we came here. That's now 13 years this month that we've been here. But before we came here, we were at a point in our life where we were looking for a new place. We were looking for a new place where I could preach. And as our situation went, we had actually been in contact with the elders up here at that time. And then, for a number of different circumstances, it didn't work out. And so I go on and I'm talking with all these other congregations, and one after the other, it's just like it just doesn't work. And I finally had to get to the point where I said, God, I can't do this. You take it. I had to let go of trying to make everything work. And I had to give it to Him. And it was about a year later then that the elders called me back and said, hey, we'd like to talk to you about coming up here and working with us. It didn't happen in a month. And I'm not saying that we can put a year timeline on things that we have. It might be longer that Yahweh is working in your life on one particular thing. But what David is saying here is you have to be willing to let go of it and roll it on to Yahweh. And then maybe one of the most difficult expressions of trust is to be still and wait. We don't like to do that. We want to be in control, but there are some times where God is just saying, I need you to be quiet and quit trying to force the situation. Again, it doesn't mean that we're not doing anything. That waiting person still obeys and prays and takes the next faithful step. But what they stop doing is they stop trying to manufacture the result. And we are really good at that. Not that we ever get the result, but we're good at trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing. And sometimes God just says, wait. Because notice what the text says. Wait or be still in Yahweh. It is having Him before us. And waiting reminds us that God sees the whole story when you and I just have one page right in front of our face. And delay does not mean that God is absent. And stillness doesn't mean that nothing is happening. But it is entrusting the timing to Yahweh because His wisdom is greater than ours and He is faithful. So what does that look like? If I am sitting there on a Monday morning and I am still struggling with worry and striving, how do I get over that? David says, stay close to Yahweh. Find your delight in Him as He delights in you. Do the good that He has placed before you. Roll over the outcome to Him. And be still and wait when you cannot move the situation forward. And trust the hands that hold you, even when things seem uncertain. Notice with me verse 24. Verse 23 just said that Yahweh delights in guiding our ways. Verse 24 says, when He fails, when you and I fail, when you and I fall, we will not be hurled headlong because Yahweh is the one who holds his hand. And here's the thing. Yahweh never loses his grip. There's never a moment where he goes, "Oh, I just had to let go." He's always there, saying, "I got you, and I will get you through this time in your life." Whether it be joyful or whether it be the worst moment of your life, hold to his hand. As that song says, to God's unchanging hand. Because he knows. He knows your way. And he knows what's best for you. But here is what you and I have to admit. There are going to be times when we fail to trust. There are going to be times when we fail to delight in him, to wait on him, to release our control. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to fret. And we're going to let our fear crowd out our trust in him. We're going to worry and we're going to strive. Because we're broken people. And if the sermon were to end right there, just trust God more, then all I'm doing is leaving you with another burden to carry as you go out of here. And that burden would be, you've got to trust perfectly. And that's not where the gospel brings us. You see, Jesus came and perfectly lived the life of trust that Psalm 37 talks about. He lived the life that we could not live. And he came to save people who fail at trusting. He took on our sin. And he died the death that we deserved. But that's not the end of the story. Because he rose from the dead, he now reigns as king, and he is our advocate before our Father. And all the things that you and I deal with, he's right there taking them to the Father, saying, I know what it's like to be in that situation when it doesn't seem like there's any hope. When it seems as everything's falling down around them. Father, help them in their weakness. You see, our hope is not in the strength of our trust, but in the faithfulness of Jesus. So let me ask you today, what are you carrying that God never asked you to control? What outcome do you need to place back into his hands? And what faithful step is yours to take next? You don't have to know everything of how it will all work out to take the next faithful step. But we're called to strive less. Not because nothing matters, but because everything doesn't depend upon us to make it right. And we're called to trust God because you are held by the faithfulness of Jesus. You know, it's one of those things that, and I don't even know where the tradition started, but we offer an invitation at the end. And if you think about it, in some ways, if I had if I wanted to know more about Jesus, or if I wanted to become a Christian, for me personally, as an introvert who tries to live as an extrovert, that would be terrifying. To come down to the front and everybody look at me and say, oh, well, what's going on with him? What does he need? But here's the thing. Today, I imagine each and every one of us, if I said, God wants you, we could all come forward and say, I'm dealing with worry. I'm dealing with striving. I'm dealing with problems in my life that I don't know how to make better. It's really today the invitation's for all of us. And you don't have to come down front. But just ask Jesus to help you. Because that's what he wants. He wants to be your friend. And he wants to show you a Father who loves you no matter what. So strive less. Notice I didn't say stop striving, but strive less and trust God more. Think about that as together we stand and sing our next song.